Huh? I don't get it. When I travel to a town I don't usually visit for shopping, I witness my husband and my mother walking arm in arm, behaving affectionately, and openly kissing in public. Taken aback, I hurried over to them, but instead of feeling remorse, they brazenly stood their ground. I promptly went to my parents' home and informed my father about the situation, leading to our divorce. However, after my father's passing, I find myself reconnecting with my mother and ex-husband. When I reunited with my mother after a long time, she was wearing loose-fitting clothes, and her clearly swollen belly caught my attention. As soon as she noticed my gaze, she smiled triumphantly.
Oh? Did you notice? I'm pregnant. It seems you couldn't achieve that no matter how long you waited.
My ex-husband chimed in.
Unlike you, she was able to have a child right away. Now I can finally be a father. Breaking up with you was the right decision.
Both of them hurled hurtful words at me, intending to wound me deeply. However, their plans would soon be thwarted. Unfortunately, I remained unscathed. With a hearty laugh. How amusing! The two of you are acting like fools. My name is Emma, and I'm a 24-year-old office worker. My parents became parents at a very young age, a classic case of an unplanned pregnancy. Both of them were quite lively in their youth. My mother, Lisa, was just 16 years old and still in high school when she met my father, James, who was 4 years older and worked as a steeplejack. My parents' courtship was quite a story. My mother fell head over heels for my father and pursued him relentlessly, while he was initially hesitant. Eventually, they started dating, and shortly afterward, my mother became pregnant with me. They got married soon after. Despite societal disapproval due to marrying in high school, my mother's pregnancy with me left no choice but to accept the situation. Initially, their young marriage seemed to be going well. When I was a kindergarten student, my father would often pick me up on rainy days when work was cancelled. One of my friends once said,
"Emma's dad is so young and handsome."
Absolutely. He's kind and I love him.
My father and I used to enjoy walking home together, chatting about the day's events under a shared umbrella. However, a certain incident struck my father, and it became the catalyst for a drastic change in my mother's attitude toward him. During work, my father accidentally fell while dismantling scaffolding, resulting in a serious injury. His body suffered extensive bruising and complex fractures, leaving him physically impaired. Fortunately, his life was not in danger, but he was left with lingering aftereffects, rendering him unable to continue his work as a steeplejack. After rigorous rehabilitation, my father regained the ability to walk, thanks to which he secured a new job through a friend's connection. However, he still needed long-term rehabilitation after his discharge. Despite this, my mother refused to be involved in any way, from accompanying him to appointments to assisting with daily care. When my father stumbled and couldn't move in the hallway at home, she deliberately ignored him or hurled hurtful words in his direction. My mother would often complain about my father in front of me, as if it were a habit. When I was young, she'd say things like,
"Look at him, stumbling around so conspicuously. Marrying this burden was a mistake. I should have married someone else after seeing more men."
But to me, it seemed like she was bullying my father, and honestly, I didn't like my mother very much. My father had to sacrifice work due to frequent hospital visits, and our family wasn't well off by any means. Since my mother worked nights, I spent more time with my father during the day. I felt closer to him than to my mother. Perhaps my mother noticed this, or maybe she simply never liked children from the start. She provided only minimal care, and I grew up feeling somewhat neglected by her. Although I managed to attend high school, after graduation, my mother insisted I work to support the household. I didn't pursue college and instead joined a small local company.
I'm sorry, Emma. My condition puts a burden on you.
Don't say that. If I can help you even a little, I'll gladly work. My father seemed apologetic as I expressed my willingness to work instead of pursuing higher education. Although I didn't want to follow my mother's advice, I worked hard for my father's sake. Eventually, after a few years of employment, I married Michael, a colleague from work. Unlike my parents' cold marriage, I wanted to create a warm home with him.
I'll cherish you, Emma. Let's be happy together. And I'd love to have lots of children.
His words delighted me, and I readily accepted his proposal. However, after a year of marriage, it seemed impossible for us to conceive. Despite my desire for children, there were no signs of pregnancy, no matter how long we waited. Feeling downcast, Michael seemed to put pressure on me as if I were solely responsible.
Why can't we have children? All my colleagues are already parents, and I'm sure it's your messed up body causing this. You're a complete disappointment as a wife. Maybe I should have married someone else.
Don't say that. It's not just my issue. I want you to come with me to the obstetrician for tests.
Why do I have to deal with such a hassle? I've always been healthy, never even caught a cold. It's obviously your fault that we can't have kids.
My husband, who constantly blames me, refuses to listen when I suggest infertility treatments. Instead, he berates me, claiming that it's my fault we can't have children.
Stop making excuses and get treatment at the hospital. It's embarrassing for me that we're married but still childless.
My words fall on deaf ears, and he continues to lay blame solely on me. Despite clinging to a glimmer of hope and pursuing fertility treatments alone, there's no sign of us conceiving. Michael gradually stops coming home. He claims it's due to work, but his late nights become more frequent. Is it really work-related? Could he be having an affair? Come to think of it, I had plenty of reasons to doubt my husband. There have been times when I detected the scent of women's perfume on my husband's clothes after he returned home late. Not just once, but multiple times. Additionally, examining the credit card statements revealed regular expenses with unclear purposes, further fueling my suspicions. However, if I confronted him directly, he would skillfully evade my questions. I had been waiting for the right moment to discuss this with him, and that opportunity arrived sooner than expected. It happened when I traveled to a town I don't usually visit for shopping. Today, I spotted my husband, who had claimed to be working on his day off. That's Michael. But he's supposed to be at work today. I was about to call out to him, but upon closer inspection, I noticed a woman walking beside him. What? Why are Mom and Michael walking together? Sure enough, my mother was smiling and strolling alongside him. Since getting married, I have distanced myself from my mother. Although I occasionally visited my parents' home to see my father, I rarely took my husband there. There was no way my husband and mother had spoken since our wedding greetings. I watched in bewilderment as the two of them walked together without noticing me. To my surprise, they held hands and eventually shared a public kiss right in front of me. What? I don't understand, I blurted out. Oblivious to my astonishment, they continued walking. Finally, I couldn't contain myself any longer. Hey, Michael, Mom, what are you two doing? When I caught up with them and confronted them, Their faces registered genuine shock.
Oh, Emma, what's the rush? We just happened to run into Michael, so we exchanged greetings. What's the matter?
It seems my mother intends to play innocent. When I saw her after a long time, she looked youthful, so much so that you wouldn't guess she was in her 40s unless told. As I approached her, I noticed something. That scent, where have I smelled it before? The fragrance of the perfume my mother wears, trying to appear younger, triggered a memory. It was the same scent I detected on my husband's clothes after his late nights. I didn't want to admit it, but I became convinced that my mother was his affair partner. Tell the truth. I saw it earlier. Michael and Mom were kissing. I blurted out.
Ha! It must be some mistake. We just happened to run into each other earlier.
When I pressed them, they exchanged a brief, nervous glance before Michael finally spoke, seemingly resigned.
Ugh, I didn't expect to get caught so soon. Why are you even here?
What's going on? Explain.
You're so dense. I thought I could keep up the charade a little longer, but I guess you saw it. Well, it's just as you suspect. I actually prefer older women.
I'm sorry, Emma. I felt bad about it, but truthfully, I've liked Michael since we first met.
Their brazen attitude left me speechless.
It just happened that I ran into Michael earlier, and we decided to have a chat over tea. Well, things got a bit cozy, and you know, I'm still young. I want to experience romance.
You and I weren't getting along well as a couple, and I was listening to her talk. But the more we spoke, the more I found myself drawn to Lisa.
I heard about it. Emma, it seems you're having trouble conceiving. Michael really wants a son. It's a pity that you're the reason he can't have one.
Unbelievable. Did you really say that to Mom?
Well, it's the truth, isn't it? Your messed up body is probably why we can't have children.
Incredibly, my husband seemed to be sharing every intimate detail of our marriage with my mother. Despite my struggles and attempts to seek advice about our infertility, he had never listened. Now, he was acting like the victim, blaming me entirely. The anger bubbled up within me, and I realized that continuing this marriage with this man was absolutely impossible. What's wrong with you both? Do you even understand what you're doing? I shouted at the two of them, who kept making excuses with smug expressions.
It can't be helped. You're a failure as a wife and as a woman, so this is how it turned out.
Huh? A husband like you, I'll gladly pass. I don't need you anymore. Give me a divorce.
Sure, fine. Honestly, I've been bored with you for a long time. You keep making excuses and can't even have children. Thinking about leaving you, a defective product, gives me relief.
Oh, I didn't mean it that way, but did I end up taking Emma's precious husband? I apologize.
Even though she doesn't think it's a bad thing, my mother offers only empty apologies. Mom, if I reveal the truth of this affair to Dad, he'll divorce you. When I said that, my mother's expression changed, but she quickly returned to her usual composed demeanor.
There's no evidence of infidelity anyway. You and Michael getting divorced is your business, but I'll divorce whenever I please. Come on, Michael, let's go.
My mother urged Michael, and the two of them swiftly left, leaving me behind. Despite being clearly involved in an affair, unlike Michael, my mother didn't seem eager to divorce my father immediately. I immediately went to my parents' house and informed my father about the situation with my mother.
I see. Even though I've endured having a woman like her as your mother because I thought you needed one, I never expected she'd neglect our daughter in this way.
Upon hearing my report, my father's expression turned sour, as if he'd bitten into a bitter pill. I'm getting a divorce from Michael. I can't imagine staying married after what he did. What about you, Dad? What will you do about Mom?
Don't worry, I have a plan. I won't let them get away with things on their terms.
Afterward, Michael unilaterally sent a pre-filled divorce form by mail, and I signed it. Our divorce was finalized. My mother never returned home after that. It seems she and Michael ran away together. Though I was angry, my father told me to let go of those two, and I decided to forget about both my ex-husband and my mother. After leaving the apartment where I had lived with Michael, I returned to my father's home. My father had become more mobile than before, and he could manage most things on his own. Ironically, it seemed that my mother's complete lack of assistance had worked in his favor.
Given the circumstances, I'm glad I can live with you again. Thank you for coming back.
I enjoyed a brief period of peace with my father, but that life didn't last long. Suddenly, my father contracted the prevalent pneumonia, teetering on the edge of life and death.
Emma, I'm truly sorry for making you endure so much. From now on, live as you please.
Just before passing away, my father firmly held my hand and uttered those words through his hazy consciousness. Tears welled up in my eyes as I nodded in response. Despite medical efforts, his condition deteriorated rapidly, and he became one of the departed. Dad, it's so sudden. I wish I had been more filial. As I continued with funeral preparations, an unexpected visitor arrived at our home.
Long time no see. So, that man is dead?
Beside my mother stood my ex-husband, Michael. The two of them entered our house with unpleasant smiles. What's your intention now, after all this time? Come back home.
Huh? Who do you think you are? That man and I are married. It's only natural for a wife to rush over when her husband dies.
Funny how you can say that. After all, you ran away and were out of touch for years.
Oh, yes, yes. Say what you want. But no matter how much you complain, I am the wife of the man who passed away. That means I have rights to property division. And insurance, too, right?
Unbelievable. So that's why you didn't divorce Dad. After retiring from steeplejack due to an injury, my father worked hard at a new company, eventually holding a respectable position just before his passing. Despite lacking formal education, perhaps the resilience he developed during his days as a craftsman played a role. Many subordinates admired my caring father.
It was worth not getting divorced. Now, let's talk about property division. You see, that man was never materialistic, so I know he accumulated wealth. Come on.
My mother leaned in, saying this to me. As I observed her, I suddenly noticed something. She wore loose-fitting clothes, and her belly was unmistakably swollen. When my gaze met hers, my mother smirked as if she had won a victory.
Oh? Did you notice? That's right. Michael's child is growing in my belly. You couldn't conceive no matter how long you waited, but I'll bear a child in your place.
Unlike you, I got someone pregnant right away. Now I can finally be a father. Breaking up with you was the best decision.
Both of them hurled hurtful words at me, trying to wound me as much as possible. However, their intentions would soon be thwarted. Unfortunately, I remained unscathed. Oh, this is amusing. The two of you are like fools. I laughed, clutching my belly. They stared at me with dumbfounded expressions.
What's so funny?
Well, it's absurd, you see. It's hard to say, but is that child really Michael's? Upon hearing my words, Michael responded with a puzzled tone.
Huh?
However, my mother's demeanor suddenly shifted. Her eyes darted, revealing clear signs of agitation. Yet, Michael seemed oblivious to it.
It's obvious it's my child, isn't it? Don't make up stories just because you're bitter.
Yes, that's right. Please don't accuse me of sour grapes.
Whether it's sour grapes or not, you'll understand once you see this. I stepped away and retrieved a certain document I had kept. I thrust it in front of both of them.
What's this all of a sudden? Huh? This.
What the hell? Why are you so surprised? It's probably not that big of a deal. Ha! What does this mean?
Both of them were taken aback as they read the contents of the document. It was a private investigator's report summarizing my mother's social connections. After her elopement with Michael, I had coincidentally spotted her in town. But standing next to her wasn't Michael. It was an unfamiliar young man. I discreetly followed them, and they entered a hotel together. What's going on? Could it be that Mom? I decided to consult my late father and investigate my mother's behavior. This is something that might come in handy someday. According to the private investigator's report, my mother is indeed involved with a man other than Michael. Michael, reading the document with an incredulous expression, scrutinized my mother, who suddenly seemed off. However, Michael appeared oblivious to her distress.
What does this report mean? Was I deceived?
No way. Emma is lying. The child in my belly is undoubtedly yours.
Despite her agitation, my mother insisted that the child was unequivocally Michael's.
Whom will you believe, me or Emma?
Well, yeah, that's true. It's absurd for you to accuse your mother just because you couldn't have a child yourself. You're quite a woman.
Michael seemed to regain his composure after being persuaded by my mother. However, whether he concluded that the report was a lie or not, he shifted the blame onto me and began accusing me. It's your right not to believe, but unfortunately, there's decisive evidence. You, come out. I called out toward the adjacent room in our living space. The door opened, revealing a man who was unfamiliar to both of them.
Huh? Who's this guy?
Who? I don't know him either.
Both of them tilted their heads in confusion at the stranger's appearance. This man is my husband. Of course, you wouldn't know. I remarried after divorcing Michael. His name was Liam. A year after my divorce from Michael, I had met him through mutual friends and remarried.
What kind of evidence does this guy provide?
Unlike Mom, I don't show it yet, but there's a baby growing in my belly. And yes, it's his child.
So what? Just say it clearly.
You still don't get it? When we were married, no matter how hard we tried, we couldn't have a child. But after I married Liam, we conceived right away. Michael seemed to catch on to my intention, his eyes widening. You avoided hospitals because you found them troublesome, but I've had proper tests, and there's nothing wrong with my fertility. So, the problem was you.
That's a lie.
But it's strange, isn't it? Despite the difficulty in conceiving, Mom is pregnant. Is this really your child? I wonder. When I posed that question, Michael couldn't argue and glared at my mother beside him.
Hey, tell the truth.
Huh, fine. I give up.
Well, you admitted defeat quite quickly. I thought you'd try to deceive us more.
It was just a fling with Michael anyway.
Hey, what's going on?
You see, I was dating you because you were Emma's husband. You know how people desire what belongs to others? But my true love was someone else, so I planned to break up with you eventually.
Michael was shocked by my mother's words, left dumbfounded.
I wanted to enjoy playing the field until I got caught, but you turned out to be quite an obstacle. Well, it doesn't matter. Regardless of whose child I'm carrying, my right to inherit from that man won't change.
Are you still saying that? Unfortunately, you'll have to give up on that. I retorted.
Huh? How many times do I have to say it? I haven't divorced my deceased husband. My right to inherit.
But I'm telling you, that right doesn't exist. After all, you and Dad finalized your divorce ages ago.
Huh? That's not.
Maybe you've forgotten because of your age, Mom, but Dad had a pre-filled divorce form that you'd signed. When I reported my mother's affair to my father, he pulled out a divorce form. Apparently, during a heated argument when he was injured and unable to work, my mother had thrust the pre-filled divorce form at him, declaring she didn't need a husband who couldn't move. In the end, he hadn't submitted it because of me, but he'd used that very form to divorce my mother before he passed away. So, you won't get a single cent of Dad's estate. Do you understand now?
This.
My mother, who had been so composed until now, turned pale. Michael continued to glare at her.
I'm leaving.
After Michael discovered my mother's affair and realized she wouldn't receive any inheritance, she fled the house. Subsequently, my mother safely gave birth to a baby boy. Without needing a DNA test, it became evident from blood type alone that the child wasn't Michael's. Shocked by this revelation, Michael abandoned my mother, who had lost her claim to my father's wealth. As for the man my mother had truly loved during her affair, it turned out their relationship had been casual. Upon learning of my mother's pregnancy, he fled as well. In the end, my mother became a single mother at the age of 40, raising a young child without any reliable support. Despite receiving government assistance, caring for the child took a toll on her health. I once glimpsed her from afar, holding her child, and her graying hair made her look more like a grandmother than a mother. On the other hand, I gave birth to a healthy girl, and now we live happily as a family of 3. When I think about it, the child my mother bore is my brother, and he is in the same grade as my daughter. It's quite complicated. On my father's Memorial Day, we plan to visit his grave together. Despite the pain caused by my ex-husband and mother's betrayal, I gained an irreplaceable family. I'm sure Dad watches over us from heaven. I believe my father would be pleased about the birth of his grandchild. With his love in my heart, I vow to continue walking harmoniously as a family.
How did you find this story? If you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing to our channel. Until next time.